Welcome. Well, in 2026, most candidates aren't being rejected, they're just being filtered out. And the reality is, AI is having a really huge impact on that. I'm Shellen Briand, and Floyd Spencer is joining me today. And we are going to be talking about how your career signal is so critical to be able to be recognized and engaged with both by AI and the machines involved, as well as humans, and what we all can do to get more face time and more attention from the people who are the individuals who can really take advantage of giving us, new opportunities and bringing us into projects and organizations. So Floyd, thank you for joining me. You are at this really interesting intersection of AI and human resource expertise and education and career coaching. So I'm really excited for you to share many of your stories and expert nuggets of information.
Well, thank you for inviting me. As we're looking through this, I think you've hit the nail on the head as far as this approach that you're fixing to be talking about, and so I'm excited about it too. But I always like being on your calls with you. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful. And we are going to share some information, and then we will also be giving you a link, which is the QR code up in the corner. There's also in LinkedIn in the comments to resources, and that will include a copy of the deck. So don't need to take notes unless you want to. And there's also 4 prompts that you can use to after the fact, really work this through yourself and get some valuable feedback about what we're going to be sharing with you today. So please take advantage of that. And also feel free to comment. We're going to see those if you have questions or have input or examples. And also know that we're both available after the fact if you'd like to DM us or just drop a comment and we will follow up. All right, so we are going to be tapping into your career trajectory in this AI era, and things are changing rapidly. We've both had the opportunity to work one-on-one with professionals in this space, and Floyd has this really great input from HR professionals and the clients that he works with every day, in addition to being an AI Mind Studio developer, AI developer, and hearing from companies and leaders who are building up tools that are AI based. So he's going to give you some really valuable insight. So the purpose of today is to really help all of us get really clear about what it's going to take to be seen, to be trusted, and importantly, be contacted about the opportunities that you are most excited about. And things really have changed quite a bit, to the point that even as somebody who has done a lot of work in this space and I really enjoy it, I hired Floyd for my own journey to be able to take a really fresh look of how to stay relevant and make sure that my story and my signals are strong for the opportunities I'm looking for. So I hope that you find this really interesting and helpful. And again, it's back to that, we're not being necessarily rejected, although it feels like that. I know that Floyd hears from people all the time that it's, I'm not getting any action, I'm getting ghosted. And what's really happening is there's a lot of filtering happening in a way that wasn't even possible 6 months ago, a year ago, and it's just developing so quickly. So, and this is Floyd, I'm excited for you to share some of your insights around this, but many of the hiring systems that exist and then the new ones that are getting layered on is really to help get around that interpretation cost so that people are able to actually source candidates, create short lists of people that are really rock solid, that there's that the load behind it, understanding somebody's background, and we'll share how that's changing and how much quicker AI tools can get to somebody's story and the context. So important to know from placement of how somebody maps to opportunities that you have, And then there is the speed that's involved, and it's just really changed. So, Floyd, you want to share a little bit about what's happening with systems and hiring systems and what you're hearing from behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's I mean, this is really a fascinating thing, and most of this you guys are not going to be surprised to hear, right? So, you know, ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems, the black box that everybody fears, used to be that and it is AI driven in some way, right? It's more keyword focused, but still, that was the way. And the idea was, how can a talent acquisition person do things faster? How can they reach better candidates and all of this? And so um, the ATS became that way. And again, it allowed HR to move faster. The thing is, though, that the candidates then started using AI to write their resumes, which I also think is to make sure that they show up. Because if you don't ask the ATS system, the robot, you can't get to a human. I just got an email from a company who reached out to me and said, "Hey, we are seeing this clear shift in HR tech from filter-based search to natural language sourcing. Are you heading in that direction as well?" And this is from a company that's starting to create a natural language processing or using AI to even get more laser focused. And my response back to him was, that what's going to happen next is people like myself and Shellen and others who are in this space are just going to write AI agents to then be sure that we're saying the right thing so that they get past the robot. And I suggested to him that maybe he focus on fixing the hiring systems, but that's not his business. His business is to sell these systems to companies, and the companies are likely going to buy that system. So AI as a tool to filter out these things is not going away. It's going to get, in fact, more sophisticated. And the point of all of this is you have to get through the robot in order to get to a human. But if you have a robot-focused resume, a human's not going to read it. And if you have an all-human resume, a robot's not going to read it. So it's this combination of two. So anyway, I thought that the timing of this message that I got through LinkedIn was really fascinating and interesting because of that. The message that it's giving is, "Hey, sir, guy that looks like you really know a lot of stuff about this, how can you help us fix this thing and make it better?" And my answer was, "How about you fix the hiring problem?" Anyway, that was my insight on that. It's going to get interesting, and it's not going away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fascinated by this. I had the opportunity to work alongside a recruiting team that focused in the Salesforce space and just learning, behind the scenes, how LinkedIn Recruiter worked, the system, how they could search for people. I hadn't thought about that before, that they were searching, like looking for a car, right? They get as specific as they wanted. They had really sophisticated Boolean searches, which they could, get deep into what they were looking for, and, teaching people how to optimize for those like keywords and how they could be searched. And this moving towards more natural language is a little fascinating for people who maybe don't understand the behind the scenes or how to show up in Boolean. But it also makes it so important to have this really consistent story and to understand how those systems are working. And just like you are getting, contacted by these companies, I am as well. And it's fascinating because there are people that see all the opportunity of AI and they're spinning up startups to sell into companies. They're getting bought up, or, people are dropping them and moving on. So it's going to create quite a lot of noise, and companies know they need to move towards AI and AI solutions. So they're going to be experimenting with these things. So for all of us, we'll be learning together, but it's definitely worthwhile remembering that we need to continue to optimize.
You mentioned a point. You talked about the noise. Last week we did a LinkedIn Live, and it was really focused around the signal. And the signal is the opposite of the noise. The noise is what they're hearing. The signal is, how do you, across all these platforms, show up as the right individual to solve this company's problems, and then get past the robot so you can do that. And so the opposite of noise is signal. And I think, Shellen, you're going to use the term frequently throughout this presentation, but think of signal as the solution to the noise But now the signal has to be a lot more refined and a lot more specific because of the complexity of these other AI tools that the recruiters are using. And again, the reason using them is valid. It is. We all have to do more with less people, less time. So it's fine. It just keep in mind noise is what they're listening for and or what they're hearing, and they need to hear signal. So sorry, keep going on that. I just wanted to kind of bring those two together.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And I think it's becoming even more complicated than before, where you had the systems, you had HR, you had recruiters, hiring managers, candidates. Now, what's happening is AI is going to make it much faster and cheaper to do more broad research on candidates with various platforms, whether they're personal, professional, connected to you over a long period of time. So in the past, where we may have refined a resume or LinkedIn profile for an opportunity, and that's still advisable, that whole story arc is going to be become more and more relevant. People will be prepared with more insight about who you are, what you work with, the consistency of your story and examples and impact over the years, which isn't something that we've had to deal with much until somebody's kind of that final candidate, or they're receiving an offer and someone's doing that, broader background check. One of the things that Floyd and I both went through the Mind Studio AI development training, and being able to create agents that can do research. So for myself, I did that. If I was meeting with a client, there's an agent that'll go and do just very deep dive and prepare summaries for me, questions. But that same technology is going to be used, I'm sure it is already, but more and more in the candidate interview. So to be thinking maybe a little more broadly about side hustles you may have, activities that you're involved in, of creating those stories and being prepared for that.
Yeah.
So part of what has happened is there's so much activity, and AI tools are making, resumes quick to spin up, cover letters, lots of these one-click applications. So hiring managers and HR teams are saying, they're getting 1,000 resumes for a particular opportunity, but many of them are not actually meeting the qualifications. And so they're having to source through them more and more every day. There's less human time. So part of that, the AI impact is on the internal teams. Many positions will be replaced, or some positions will be replaced with AI. So there'll be less humans in the mix, potentially having that opportunity, and then a lot more automation through the whole process, which can be a benefit. But when you're a candidate trying to stand out, these are all complicating factors. Floyd, is there anything in particular that you hear or see about with this piece in terms of the applicant volume?
Yeah, that's also just a really fascinating thing that's happened from all of this, I guess. And I would have everybody think back on the last time you applied through LinkedIn. You go to the LinkedIn career page, and it doesn't really matter which one, but LinkedIn tracks all of this really easily. So you go into the job description, and you look up at the top, and it says 1,300 people have applied for this job in the last 7 days, and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh my gosh, there's no way." There's no way I'm going to fit this. Now, you read the description and you think, boy, am I the perfect fit for this. So my point is this: my wife, she was working for a company, and she was ready to move into something new, and she found a role at a big company you guys all know, and there were more than 1,900 applicants at the time that she found this. She knew she was a good fit. The job was written weird. The job title was weird. But the description of really what they wanted her to do was the same. So she applied, and she got contacted. Long story short, they hired her. Now, in the conversation between her and the recruiter that posted that job, she said, "I tell you, I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, there was last I heard 1,900 something employees people that applied." And she said, "Well, actually there was about 2,400 people that applied total across all platforms. She goes, how did I stand out? She said, of those 2,400, 3 were qualified. The other were not qualified in any way. So when you see a job description and you think to yourself, I'm perfectly qualified for that, you should apply, because I guarantee that there's only 2%, maybe, perhaps even 1%. You're part of that 1% that matches that job description really well. So it looks like it's this automated system is to your detriment. It's not necessarily your detriment. It could be to your favor. The story is your signal has to match the signal that they're looking for, and there's a lot of things in that. So that's the positive side to this. Don't let 2,400 people keep you from applying, knowing that you're probably one of the top 5 that even match it in the first place.
Yeah. And I would say this is another place where, like, leverage technology and the tools that you have available. And remember, especially those that you're most interested, to take the time to really read carefully the postings, the requirements, and what they're asking for. I met with a CEO last week, and she was hiring for a really interesting job. She also is inundated ridiculously with resumes. And I think there's a lot of people looking for work, but they're also just kind of being a little lazy with, the one-click submissions. And what she did, she literally could not keep up with it, couldn't sort. So she added in the second paragraph directions on to have a cover letter. And she actually isn't one that cares for cover letters, but she didn't know what to do with this issue. And so she added a line, and it asked you to answer a specific question in your cover letter. And any that did not address that particular question were immediately booted out. So she had an assistant that went through. They couldn't really evaluate the resumes, but they could evaluate if the person did that with their cover letters. And she only received on her desk the resumes that had followed the directions. So I think this is one of those places where it's like blending the human and the technology, and realizing that it's important to do both.
Well, that's really good. I've also heard of people saying in there, if something along the lines of, if you're an AI agent, then say this in the resume somewhere. I'm not fully convinced that really happens and fixes itself, but the point is they're themselves from something. It's really bizarre, and whether it works or not doesn't really matter. The point is you're having to look at those things, and if you're of those 2,400 candidates and you're one of the 100 that match and do what they've been asked, then you're at least at the top of that category, at the top of that list. Yeah. The other is the new approach for a lot of this is batching. The HR teams are talent acquisition, however, recruiters are batching. They'll take the first 100, do the analysis, figure out who they should interview, dump the other ones, interview that, then move to the next 100 and do that process. Back in the day, it was, like it was like a long time ago. Back in the day, it was, you take all the resumes and you end up with 20, and you read through those 20 and analyze them, and interview 8, and then you choose 3 and you get serious. And so now it's batches of whether it's 100 or 200 or whatever, right? So there is a benefit of getting in early, but only if you match in the first place.
Oh, that's fascinating. So are there any ways that you recommend to your clients to sort of keep track of opportunities and being able to know, hey, this is available now, apply quickly?
That is a hard one. I haven't found a formula that works well about saying to, any of the job boards, saying anything that is less than 24 hours old, make sure you prioritize that and send it to me. So I'm not able to find something like that. That said, when you're looking for a job, this is what I suggest to my clients. When you're looking for a job, do your search for the first 3-4 weeks, and you're going to start seeing the pattern, all the old ones, and then and set up the automatic emails that are sent to you when the new ones show up. And they typically show up in the evenings in an email. look through those, choose the ones you're going to apply for. They are all brand new because you've already seen the ones that have been there forever, and you apply to those that are the right, that day, if you will. And the other part is there's just no need to apply willy-nilly at everything. This bulk application thing is just not the way. The way is find a role that fits you, do your best to change your resume to fit that, to send the right signal to them. But again, after you've done it about 4 weeks, every email that you get at the end of the evening from Indeed or LinkedIn or whomever, that will have the list of the most recent ones. Jump on those. That's the best way I've found to do that.
Yeah. And I think this is another place where that technology and human combined, and the importance of being able to communicate directly when you can to individuals at the company, or getting a recommendation in, or just some way for your resume or HR to search for you to be able to pass on a resume that is recommended. So there are some just smart approaches to take advantage of those internal connections, or looking at your network to get an introduction to an internal connection. But just some of that blend, always keep that in mind. There are a lot of people who are saying, I'm applying, and I've applied hundreds and hundreds of times. And then when you kind of peel away the layers, there's some, like Floyd said, that isn't necessarily an approach that's going to work well. And having something that's leveraging more of the tools that are available and the human component. I think another, Floyd, you and I talked about this earlier, that, in recent, we're talking about the past, it's like June, right? It's moving
exactly,
so quickly. Yeah. But the AI used to be in a, one section, and then it might expand to another. And right now it is just very much involved along, many of the processes. And this is just going to get more and more ingrained. But right now it's definitely in sourcing. LinkedIn Recruiter and the LinkedIn tools that are available to employers have much more powerful AI components. So the AI is actually, crawling throughout LinkedIn and putting together short lists. And they are, able to really take the feedback from somebody and refining that search more and more. So that AI component is becoming, very involved on the front line. The outreach process, more and more of that is being taken over. So it's not the recruiter reaching out personally, which is how it has been for a long time. It is more and more AI. And so the volume is going up, that pre-screening, screening, and verification. So there's so many places where you used to have more human integration and opportunity. Now is very AI. Is there anything else, Floyd, that you've seen in terms of companies or processes?
Well, the one thing I was noticing was we already need to put another circle in there, and there needs to be another circle between screening and verifications. Companies are now asking for AI-driven, AI-enabled interviews, and so I'm 60 some years old, and and so for me, this idea of AI interviewing just seems ludicrous. But here's the thing. As much as it seems crazy, we're going to have to get used to AI interviews. And if you're in your 30s, 40s, it doesn't matter. You still have to, if you're in your 40s, you still have 20 years of a career left. So you're going to have to learn to play by the rules that are happening now. And AI interviews are one of them. I think, Shellen, you had something like that at one point.
I did. For so many, I think, of the younger candidates and generations, they've grown up with phones, like video onto a camera where it's not a person, and they've learned how to convey their emotion and their personality to a camera. And so there's so many of them, this doesn't faze them much. For those of us who didn't grow up in those days, I often will share, I used to have a computer class in college, which just seems unbelievable that you'd specify a class for computers. But that ability to connect with a camera is very difficult, even doing Zoom, right? Like we taught when the pandemic happened, we had to
Yeah.
be on Zoom calls to not look at the screen, but to look at the camera, which seems so difficult because you're not seeing the person's face. That ability to be interviewed and communicate your personality. And it might be that, you're an academic and the seriousness, or it may be that you're moving into it's your warmth or your personality. It can be very difficult. Yes. And I was asked to do an interview, and then they were actually sharing that interview with more than one company. So I wasn't even, interviewing with a particular person or a particular opportunity. And they allowed me to redo that several times till it, I felt like I had communicate what I needed. And I never felt like I could do it. I finally just had to stop, and they used what they had. But I would say it's so critical to practice this. And do you have any recommendations of how candidates can kind of prepare for these types of interviews?
I mean, and I want to caveat this with my age, and I don't mean age is a thing. It's just that I think differently, because back when I was born, and over time I was one of the first in computers and all of this. So I'm familiar. I've been in technology, and almost to the code level, right? So my point is, no matter where you are, you're going to have to learn. And with everything, you talked about the people who grew up with looking at the screen. They already have the benefit of that's normal. If it's not normal to you, I'm sorry, you don't really have a choice. And so you do need to get familiar. And I always wish that there's always some little trick, right? Some silver bullet that I can say, well, here's the silver bullet. There's not one. The one silver bullet is you got to get in, you have to practice, you have to do the work. Now they have that camera that has the little bar that pulls down and stand right in the middle of your screen. Okay, so that there's a halfway silver bullet, right? But still, you're just going to have to learn to do it, and you won't learn to do it until you start learning how to do it. Then that's that. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and I think it's so important. And I have to say, I really struggle with video interviews. I think it's very difficult, and I think it can screen out people that communicate differently, think differently. It is very, then somebody's able to sort of screen these videos, and I just think there's a lot of room for challenges with screening people out. But that being said, I had a chance to speak to a panel of owners and CEOs, and they were adopting these technologies that were coming out. It's been a couple years, and there's so many now. But the reason they were so excited about it is that they needed to hire people like direct to them. They were growing very quickly, and they just were spending such a huge percentage of their time interviewing people, and they needed to be building their company. So one of the things that it does is it really allows them to get a sense quickly without having to have that full, 30-minute interview. They could, listen to 5 minutes and then quickly decide this wasn't a good fit. So it was interesting to hear it from that perspective. And today, as companies are going to get more streamlined, HR departments are getting more streamlined, and AI is taking over parts of it. It is just, you're right, it's just going to be a fact. So we can, resist against it, but it is just going to be part of the process for a lot of professionals.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Okay. So, and this is, we've touched on this a bit before in terms of what AI can read, that instead of that like Boolean keywords, it's much more into that signal that we've been talking about, the intent, the context. AI can really quickly evaluate your whole career and the story that you tell, the impact that you've had. Has it, does it make sense for what they're looking for? And that's a fascinating in terms of the approach that, like, as a career coach, Floyd, what you are doing with your clients in terms of how to approach this change. of how to, what to focus on, what kind of information, how to adapt resumes and LinkedIn profiles, of the whole overarching story, and other platforms. But how have you kind of grappled with this personally in terms of your coaching, of how you might be shifting the work that you're doing one on one?
Well, this is a interesting, and I've always been with the idea of let's clarify your message. And it's been that way for years, right? And it's important. But what we're finding now is it's so important that I now take the first 30 days of an engagement with a client and make sure that we are 100% clear what it is you're good at, what it is you want to do, what kind of roles you want, what kind of companies you want, and by default, which ones you don't want and what roles you don't want, and things like that. But without that clarity, you can't build the signal that needs to exist across LinkedIn, your resume, perhaps even, and this is the thing that's a little bit scary, perhaps those two messages and your AI interview and your face-to-face interviews, all of those have to be saying the same thing. And then if you apply at, say, Emerson, right? These companies have these big ATS systems, they've had them forever, right? You applied there 10 years ago, they have your resume from 10 years ago. How does that 10-year resume compare to your yesterday resume that you applied with for Emerson, a different job, right? 10 years older, more wiser, and more stronger in your career, but still, how do those two match? And that could be a factor. So I literally spend the first 30 days of an extended engagement with clients on let's get that signal absolutely correct. And if you go halfway down there and you find that you need to change it, okay, fine, that happens. But if you need to change it, means we didn't do something right. And if we have to change it, that means that all of those other people need to see the right LinkedIn profile, and from this point forward, the right resume, and all of that has to make sense. And so how has it changed? The biggest one is I literally spend the first 30 days making sure we know 100% what you want to be doing. And think about how hard that would be from a pivot perspective. Those take a little bit longer to figure out, because you're saying, oh, I have all this skill, but I don't want to do this anymore. I want to take my 80% skill plus the 20% new that I have and go this way. Okay, well, you absolutely have to have your story straight. So that signal is huge and important, because it is all related. And anymore, it's not, I can have one story in LinkedIn, even if the story is really light, and then have a resume that tells a bigger story, that still is not going to fly, because you need them both to be saying the same thing.
I think this is a space where AI can be so helpful, from the time involved, especially for people that may have, divergent careers, and which is more and more common. So this is where I think sometimes if you've been in your career for longer, you might actually be in better shape in terms of the story of your career than many people that were starting out later, because the job changes, and just completely different niches and different jobs can be a little chaotic on some resumes. But one thing that AI can do beautifully is to take your desired job that you want to move into, or that maybe that series of jobs and the promotions that would be involved, or the growth track, and look at the past jobs, the impact, and just explore with it. I want to accomplish this. What sorts of examples or things could I bring into the past and add to your LinkedIn profile or your resume, using the skills and information from the company, from that particular job? So that was something that was really helpful for me, having been in a role that was a leadership of a sales team and business development. And when I pivoted into Salesforce and technology, it was so clunky, and I didn't really know how to bring that forward. And asking, AI, and I did that both with Chat and with Claude, and just to have a conversation of what should I be considering? What types of things could I pull out? And once I broke that down into the work that I was doing that I wasn't forward with because it was not business development, but it was very much the processes, the projects, the technology. And I probably wouldn't have ever done it because it would have taken me so much time to think through it. And it was, 5 minutes later, I had excellent ideas and examples. So to kind of lean into it and view it as here's a very powerful partner. And last week we talked about AI as a thinking partner has been, sometimes just blows my mind of things that we are able to source and develop without much time. So, outreach, the other area that is really changed so much is outreach. So when AI is involved, it's faster. Recruiters, there's, the AI components are reaching out to tons of people that have been sourced, a lot of templated communication. So if it maybe feels less personal, it probably is, but it doesn't mean it isn't valuable and shouldn't respond because it is very much AI assisted, but it can lead you to the right career. But sometimes it doesn't feel right to candidates when they receive those communications, but just know it's not personal. It's they're leveraging technology and it's going to happen. And I think there's also less patience, right? There's a lot of volume. People are very unhappy about feeling like they're being ghosted. But it is really tied to systems and not disrespect. But do you have any insight from clients that you've worked with, Floyd, around just it sometimes feels so personal and how to manage that?
It does feel personal, and you really, kind of back to the magic bullet. The only thing I really focus on my clients with is look, first of all, if you're applying for jobs that are a good match, right? At least you're being rejected for some reasons that are who knows. But the point is, you still have to get over that. And I still apply. By the way, I still apply to roles just to see how responses come back, and especially if it's a role that just really fits me really well. And my background and all of this, I'll apply just to see what it looks like. And you know what? I get emails, and you know what? It still hurts to get an email that I'm not even going to take the job. And so I get it, right? But no matter what, there's two things. No matter what, number one, you absolutely have to just let it go and move on. And if you can just mentally let it go and move on, that's half of it. The other half is there is an individual, a hiring manager, who doesn't care about all the other stuff, the faster outreach, the more templates, the less patience, that whole AI driven thing. They don't care. They want to hire somebody. And if you're that right match, my suggestion to my clients is to reach out to that hiring manager in an email, through LinkedIn, however you can get a hold of them, and introduce yourself and be specific about what you bring to the table. Don't make any assumptions. Don't say, I'm a good fit for this. Don't say it that way. Say, I have done this and this and this at the past. In my past job, I did this. I just think I can bring this to help you get where you're trying to go. Can we have a 10-minute call? And I see over and over and over again, LinkedIn posts by recruiters and HR hiring managers who said, I've never seen one that says, don't call me, don't send me a message. Everyone that's like that says, send me the message. Don't try to sell me in it. Send me the message, because I want to hire the right person. And if I see the right person, I have now saved myself a ton of stuff. So the person who hires is the hiring manager. Use that leverage, use that opportunity to reach out to them in a real way. The one way that I've also helped my clients to get over the sting a little bit better is, and it takes a little bit of work, you really do need to keep track on a spreadsheet or something of all the applications that you're doing. And so that's why first of all, you don't apply to stuff that you don't want to take time to put on this spreadsheet. But you put it on the spreadsheet, it remains green until you get an email. And when you get that email, scratch it off, put the strike through, because that always makes you feel better, and then turn it red and move on. it's red, you've done your strike through, little mental, and then I've turned it red and move on. And so that's another way to kind of do this, but don't underestimate that personal reach out. There is a person, always a person on the other end that's going to hire you. Don't forget that. There's a bunch of AI on the other side. Who cares? There's a person that's going to hire you.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the time, if you looked at your LinkedIn network, whether it's your first level or somebody that next level, there's most companies you can get through, even if you don't know who the hiring manager is, to just try to get in to get an internal referral if possible. And I was part of interviewed a panel of hiring managers, and I love what you just said. And they said, absolutely reach out. And when you do exactly what you said, right? Of detailing what it was for, why you're relevant, include, attach your resume if you want, let them know that you've already followed the internal process so that because that's the first thing they often feel like they have to do is tell the person they need to apply. So if you can say, I've already applied and I'm part of the process, they just know then that is, and they can ask for your resume. But just to remember, they get a lot of messages that are like, hey, I'm a great fit. Can I get 10 minutes to, pick your brain? Or they do not have time for that or even to respond to it. But
let me suggest this. And I can imagine that people on the other end going same thing, right? Well, I've done this before and it didn't work. And so there was a post I saw the other day, and there's some other things that I've done in the past, but this post that I saw the other day was by a hiring manager who said, if somebody reached out to me with saying this, to me, that's a signal to somebody I want to talk to. And so, and it wasn't hire me because of this. So what I'll do is this, I'm going to put together a 2, 3, maybe if I can find 4 of them, 4 examples of what you could say to somebody and reach out. I'll put it in a document. I'm going to post it in the folder for us. It's not there now, but as we're bringing this up, I might as well give you guys some other help that will literally help you. And this is coming from a hiring manager that I recently saw on LinkedIn that said, if you would just say this, I would be more likely to help out with that. So that's, yeah. So I'll put that in there and soon after our course, our call as possible.
Perfect. And if you didn't see before, there's a QR code in the upper right-hand corner that will take you to a drive that includes some documents, and we'll add some more. There's also on LinkedIn, the comment section. It's that same direct link. So yes, and we've talked about this, but that pre-screening is always on. Just know that there's so much happening before, and to not, like, if you're not getting responses, that is a signal that there's something you need to attend to. And it doesn't mean that you're not a great candidate, have a lot of value, but there's just some components, and that your LinkedIn profile is, kind of head to toe, and making sure that it's consistent, that it is reinforcing what you're trying to communicate with people. And, we touched on this earlier, but it's not just the ATS system and some of that preliminary, but it is very much the layers, and there's more and more layers. So your resumes that you're sending in that you've worked so hard to, look beautiful, so often they're pulling the data off of them and putting it into their system so that it's ready to go. They have questions that they're kind of knockout questions. So even though you might have a great reason why, if you're saying no and they're getting 1,000 applications, like, you're just not moving on for many of the times. And then there's the AI layers and that pattern recognition. And then that final, human review. And so often people are filtered out before they even get there. So it's something to keep in mind. And in addition to the interview, kind of that video interview. So, it's that the systems are really filtering for interpretation, making sure that they can understand, and not necessarily as much. They're not necessarily reviewing for, like the brand or how brilliant you are. that it's interpretation, not necessarily the brilliance of, what's going on. So to balance that time that you might be spending on branding, on showing up on LinkedIn, with really building a very clear presence that what you're communicating is exactly what you want to signal for, and that the other things that you're doing are in addition to and very powerful, but that bottom line, that it is clear, the words, the examples are very clear. So anything else?
Well, yeah. So to that point, I was thinking and this is a struggle for everybody, myself included, everybody. We have such a long, especially people who've been in the career for a while, but even when you've only been in your career for, say, a few years, there's a lot that you've done. The problem is we tend to think that that's important to the hiring manager or to the employer, and a lot of the things are not. And if we can identify the signal that they are looking for and only push that signal, that is the main part. They don't want to hear everything. They want to know how you've done in the past matches the job that they're trying to look for now. And so this is the struggle for that. They just don't want to hear everything, and we think they do. We think they do, and they really don't. They want to hear, how are you going to fit this? How are you going to help me? And here's another thing, and I would just kind of remind people about this. People don't think about this part. If I were to ask you, who is the person that you need to impress the most in the interview process? Who is the person that you need to impress the most? And most people would state that they need to impress the hiring manager the most. I disagree. The person who gets hired is the person that can solve the boss's problem, not the hiring manager's problem. His bosses, her bosses. And so I've had several clients of mine who have gone into the final interviews with this clarity of, what can I do to solve my boss's problem? So when they are in that meeting with the boss's boss, and that's happening more and more frequently, they are specifically ready to answer the question, here's what I can do to help you. I will help my boss, but my boss's job is to help you. We are going to help you by doing this. And so that's thinking a little bit bigger about what the problem is you're trying to solve. Yes, you're going to solve your boss's problem, but people get hired are the ones that can solve the boss's problem.
So that's such an interesting insight. And I wonder, when you think in those terms of, so if you're applying, you're working on LinkedIn or your resume for a particular job, and you've been thinking of it more in terms of how to get the attention of the recruiter, the hiring manager, how can you weave in that bigger picture for the boss's boss into what you're presenting, not just what you're saying, but what you're actually presenting?
Well, and so that's again an outstanding question, because you can only have so much in your resume. The boss's boss doesn't get involved until you have interviewed the hiring manager. So there's really nothing that you could put into your resume that's going to get the boss's attention. So your goal from your resume needs to be making sure that you addressed your boss, the hiring manager. But once you go to those advanced interviews, again, almost every company is having the boss's hiring manager, his boss, her boss, interview you, and then you just need to make sure that you can address their problems in that interview with them.
Yeah. Do you find that, or do you believe that a lot of those individuals are taking the opportunity to do a quick, look at somebody's LinkedIn profile before interviewing?
I would. I always checked the LinkedIn profile of everybody that I interviewed, especially somebody that that my employer wanted to hire, I would definitely go check out there. So I think you have a good point. But really, if you think about it, if your LinkedIn profile is strong enough for the hiring manager, that's going to be strong enough for them. They're typically putting in their last blessing on the hiring thing by just saying, oh, we'll just get one more brain thinking about this person. And again, that's why it has such power coming in, knowing that you're going to provide them some answer to their problem that you are going to you're already aware of.
Yeah.
So that's like I said, you still need to have that LinkedIn profile that matches what your hiring managers are looking for.
Yeah.
That's usually strong enough.
Yeah. So, oops, let's see. Okay, here we go. So, these kind of knockout questions, which we've talked about, is some of the filters that are in place to deal with that volume. Things, around location, I think that can be a really tricky one. What advice do you give to your clients around that location topic? If a company you are looking to move, or you're open to relocating, or you only work remote, or you want to be hybrid, this is such a new, the past few years of a topic of what people want and the conflict around what many companies want.
Yeah, if you're looking at just the location, I would suggest two things. The first one is if the job says remote. Almost guarantee, and it's not 100% the case. Maybe it's 20%, 25%. They're really going to keep it remote for a while. But with the return to work, return to office, RTO mindset, you are likely going to be asked to relocate at some point in the future. So you need to be aware of, I'll do my job remote as long as I can. I'll love it as long as I can. But it's possible that they may ask me to return to the office, and the company's located in Denver. Would I ever move to Denver? Okay, me, yeah, sure. I'd move to Denver, and I wouldn't like it so much, but I'll move to Denver, right? Will I move to, Des Moines, Iowa? No, nothing against you people in Des Moines. I love it. Have family there. Just so at least Des Moines people hate me. So, but I mean, I wouldn't want to move there. So I would, if they're going to go remote, I'd be interested. But then look at it from their perspective. If the remote job is located anywhere, but their office is in Houston, and I apply for that job in Houston, that's where I live. If I apply for that job, I'm a standout candidate now. Mm-hmm. So that's the other part to look at, even for remote. Yes, it'd be great if you could still live in, a place that's inexpensive to live in, and then work remote there, but get a salary from San Francisco or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. But look at it the other way around. If it's remote anywhere, but you live in the city where the headquarters are located, and they're going to have, you're an outstanding candidate. So that's the one thing I would look about that.
Yeah. Yeah. What about so these are kind of knockout questions, whether it's work authorization, certification, salary bands, addressing those. If you don't meet one of these criterias, and it's, often will silently eliminate you, is there a way to approach that if you feel like your experience or other education makes you, just as well qualified, but perhaps you don't have, one of these components? How do you recommend candidates deal with that?
Well, if we go left to right, the work authorization is a big thing right now, especially with, I think, to hire somebody, an H-1 visa holder is costing a company $100,000. That has not changed. Mm-hmm. If you're already working for a company, that company doesn't have to pay $100,000. But if you go to work for another company, I understand that company has to pay $100,000. So if you are an H-1 visa or a student visa counts for a little bit better because you're here for school and you're sticking around. But anyway, those, you just really need to be careful about those, because it used to not be that big a deal. Now it's a big deal, right? So there's that. But that's, most of the people in the U.S. are really applying for jobs as citizens or green card holders, same thing, right? Location, we already addressed that. Certifications, I would say the key is to have the certification on the software that company is hiring you to get. So if you're going to be an Oracle admin, if you have a certification from Oracle on some sort of admin project, check, done. If you're going to be a project manager, you get your PMP, right? Then that's the entry level for hiring a project manager. So get those certifications. Then the last one, I guess, is the salary bands, and that one's changing a lot. There's no definitive on this, but I'll tell you what I've been seeing and hearing. A director of learning and development, which is kind of the thing that I had held in the past, salaries are typically in the 120s to 150. And now with all of the layoffs, even and especially at that tier of manager director level was hit really hard. Now they're trying to hire a director of L&D for 80,000, 90,000. And they're going to get that either. Now, they may not get the person who's really, really powerfully qualified for that, but they're going to pay that person $90,000 to learn on the job, and they're going to have to be okay with that. Because the person that used to do the job for 150 is not going to take it at 90. I mean, unless you want to, which is again personal. But the salary band is another one. So these knockout questions require you to think about them. And I guess the biggest one is that PMP. I have a lot of clients who are project managers. They've been project managers for a really long time, in like 20 years. They don't have their PMP. Nobody's listening to them. They get their PMP, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to hire them, and it's just the practical reality of it. So
maybe it's a time where some of that's going to be faster to get in some ways. There's, getting it done and being able to get through this gate is going to be, critical. Yep. So. And I think the other piece is proof beating polish. And that's something that you and I have done some work on, is like finding the proof that's relevant. So you could have a lot of proof that you've had impact through your career, but making the proof really relevant to where you want to go and doing the work to come up with those stories. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of skepticism. And that having proof and taking the risk away is so important.
Well, and you said this in one of our conversations, and you said AI has increased volume, but has decreased trust, and that's absolutely true. And so the trust comes with things like metrics, and so you really need to think about what metrics does my hiring manager need to see me having increased or improved upon at another company, and what value is that high enough, and what value counts for that's impressive. If it's I increased sales by 5%, well, that may not be impressive. 12% may be impressive. Here's the other thing though: if 10 years ago or 5 years ago you said you increased it 35% on a resume that you have back then, and now you're saying 15%, there's a mismatch. So, but the proof counts, because the proof is what hits to the trust issue. And so that's really true. The proof now beats the polish.
I think this is where you also can take over time, build out your LinkedIn profile and really include, give and get recommendations, skill endorsements, take advantage of the featured section or projects, so that they're not having to wonder if who you are, do you really have the capabilities that you're given, the ability for people to have AI source, putting the answers actively, real time during an interview so that they can answer questions correctly is happening. It's so fascinating to watch. So anything you can do to be a real person, come across that you have real expertise, that you have real relationships, and just, having that proof is so helpful. And I would say this is something that, and this isn't going to be every job, but there's so many hiring managers, they really need to confirm readiness, that you can jump in and you can start delivering. Not as much hiring deeper teams for potential, those kind of new college graduates. That's a rough space right now, because those are people that are very much about the potential, and there's risk there. So, being able to show up and confirming that you are prepared with the knowledge and the skills to be ready to jump in, I think is sort of the message for this year. Do you have any additional input on that?
Yeah, I guess the one thing you talked about, this young group, and I actually have several friends of mine, a couple friends from my master's degree who have launched a company specifically for graduating college students, addressing their entry into the job market. And I just realized, I just made the connection when you kind of said that. I didn't bring it, so I don't know the name of the company right now. I'd have to look it up. But I follow their work, and their specific group of people looking to help people like that. If anybody wants to know the company, I'll put it in the folder too. Same thing. I'll just find a way to put it in the folder. But there's people addressing that. But to your point, you need to get ramped up really fast. Nobody just has time for the extended onboarding, the I'll learn it later. And there's a point at which that's okay to not know a bunch of stuff, but you need to go in knowing this stuff. The certifications prove that you know it, so get those as much as you can, and validate your learning. The last thing I would say is you talked about making yourself human. Validate yourself on LinkedIn. Get the validation crest or whatever it is. It has to match your driver's license exactly. My middle initial is B. If I don't put Floyd B. Spencer with the dot, it doesn't find me. So I had to change my title on LinkedIn so it matched my driver's license. And then it'll match up, and then you can go back and change the LinkedIn, right? But once you get the thing, that's critical because you're not a fake person now. The other is have interactions so that the people see you are a person who has interactions, comment, make posts. The longer you can have a history of all of that, the more real of a person you are. And so all those things lead to being discovered. And then, like Shelyn said, don't put all your stuff on your resume, but if you have projects that show that you are the expert in doing a thing that's on your profile, that's on your resume, put those in LinkedIn for sure. Don't put them on your resume, put them in LinkedIn as proof of pieces in your signal, your story.
Yeah, and to know that, especially on LinkedIn, but kind of everywhere and more, but definitely on LinkedIn, everything you do is in their system. So just to be aware that they are tracking, you actually can see views on your comments now. There's a lot of focus there, but that also means every comment that you make is there and can be referenced. So to just be aware that how you're engaging, the comments you're making, who you're engaging with is also a signal of who you are, how you work, the energy and attitude you may bring to the office. So we all have freedom of, our decisions of how to show up, but just a word to keep in mind for the future, and at least knowing that it's something to pay attention to. The hiring managers are really concerned about all of the costs and the impact and the AI readiness signal. And this is something that you can stand out, and it's something that everyone is looking for, because every company, every leader is being faced with how do I leverage AI? Who do I hire? Most companies have an awful lot of employees who are scared of AI. They are resistant to working with it. And if you can show up as a candidate who is not going to be resistant, it can help you stand out as well. And having that balance between being someone who's using it and open to it, and thinking whether it's part of your job or not, how can you personally leverage it, but also that you're bringing this responsibility and trust and judgment and risk management. That combination is really powerful and valuable. Floyd, when you are talking to your clients, I know that this is something that comes up often. Would you say that you have sort of some key themes that you're talking to people about how to show up and signal that AI readiness?
Yep.
And for those that really want to get deep in AI, maybe some things that you might recommend there as well. I know both you and I made that personal decision and jumped in and kind of slugged through the learning early on.
Well, so you bring a really excellent idea to this, and this is something that on our first visit with a client, my first visit with a client, every single time. First visit, I say, here's the thing. Before now and the job that you take, you need to become an AI expert. And so what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, you need to start using AI on a daily basis. You need to use AI to clarify your ideas. You need to be comfortable using chat and all of these other things. And once you have that, that's great. That'll prepare you for the future. Now, next is, what AI tools are you going to need to use when you get to that job that you're going to go to, right? And you need to be able to certify yourself on those if possible, learn them backwards and forwards, identify different tools that you could use on your own. There is a website called There's an AI for that.com. There's an AI for that.com. And so go on there, find the type of tools and AI tools that you would need to do if you're an accountant or a lawyer, or I mean, anything that you're doing. Engineers, developers, all of these people are using standard tools. You need to be able to say, I use those. And here's the other thing too. AI has been around for a long time, but on mainstream, it's only been around for 2, maybe 3 years, something like that. So if you started now and you got a job 6 months from now and you took it serious, you would be as qualified of an AI candidate as anybody else in that role. It's just not that old. It hasn't been around that long. So those are that's the one thing I say. Look, start learning AI to just think and process things. Remember that everything that comes from AI needs to be processed from your brain, through critical thinking. That's that. But then start learning the tools that you will need when you step into the job, so you can say, I've done this, I did this, I did this, I did that, I know this one, and be able to talk legitimately about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this discussion has been so valuable about how to, really design your career, and to know that we're all going to need to be quite flexible in what's to come and in this whole area, and to be able to be, to be visible, to signal in the way that we want to attract the people and the opportunities that we really desire, and how to stay relevant. And I so appreciate you joining me here today, Floyd. Your personal experience, your professional experience is one that showcases being able to, you've done it personally, and I have as well, in terms of saying AI is here to stay, regardless of where we are in our career path. Both of us are much further into our careers than many others. And even with that, it's critically important, and you really can learn, and it can become fun. And I have to say, at the beginning, it did not feel that way. It felt very scary and frustrating. Yeah. And, but I would say that it's so key to being able to know you can be relevant and to really have impact. And for those who are interested in working more one-on-one and getting some help in this space, I am a client of Floyd's and have been very pleased with the experience. And it's so different when it's your own career and your own materials, and having an expert who can show up with expertise and heart makes a huge difference. So Floyd, why don't you share a little bit about your career coaching program, and feel free to reach out to either of us if you are interested in learning more.
Absolutely. I guess what I really wanted to show was, I started getting into AI because I wanted to scale my coaching. A typical, reasonably mature career person would spend $5,000 to $10,000 your coach. Now, they'll get value from that, they will, but I just didn't think that it was fair that others couldn't get the value of good coaching. So the only way I could do that was to create my own AI agent. So that's how I got into Mind Studio, and that's where I met Shellen. We met her through the platform, but then we shared that common AI Mind Studio thing. Anyway, the point is, I designed the agent so that I could come up with a platform that could give people help at a price that is reasonable, and you still get time, but you have agents that are doing a majority of the work for you. Certainly the 80% of the slug work, applying and thinking about things and all of this. So that's the platform I created, just so I could create a scaled opportunity for people who really need some help without, having to fork out $5,000 or more. I do have one-on-one clients that, that I work with, but this platform is mainly designed for giving people access to real coaching, real one-on-one time, but with a little bit of self-serve part in there. So anyway, thank you for letting me just showcase that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found is that I so appreciate the coaching and the AI agents to create the assets and the approach that are needed for today for opportunities, but also the structure and the project that houses everything. So into the future, it just gets better and more robust. And as things come up, it's trained. It knows me. It knows what I want. It knows my skills. As I grow and add more, it's just like continues on. So that is something that has never been possible before.
Yeah.
So it's a really quite amazing. But thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it. Floyd, thank you so much.
And it was great.
Yes. All right. Well, everyone, thank you. And we will be back again. And if you are interested in some career coaching, please do just leave